Hello, everyone, and welcome to Field Notes live event. My name is Sara Russell, and I'm a soil scientist in Texas and the Field Notes regional representative for the South Central Soil Survey region. As a regional representative, I serve on the Field Notes Review Committee. The Review Committee solicits and selects topics for each webinar. We have selected one exciting topic for you today, and we encourage you to ask questions at any time using the Q&A panel. The Q&A panel should open by default. However, if for some reason it does not, simply click the question mark icon located on the right side of your screen. For closed captions, turn on the live caption button located in the lower right corner. Today's session is being recorded, and recorded sessions are available in Teams on the Field Notes channel and the National Soil Survey Center's YouTube channel. Again, thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed today's session. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Deb Harms to tell you a little more about today's webinar. Deb?
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, folks. My name is Deb Harms, and I'm the national leader for the Kellogg Soil Survey Laboratory. I'm also currently the acting director for the National Soil Survey Center. And today I'm excited to discuss and share with you the Matthew Ballmer and Leo Lato, and they're going to do the soil survey at the Mojave National Preserve. Matthew is an MLRA office leader in Victorville, California. He graduated Cal Poly SLO in 1998. He started mapping, he started mapping histosols in the Tongass National Forest in Alaska in 2001 and joined NRCS in California in 2002. He has mapped soil surveys in MLRA 19 and 20, coastal Southern California, MLRA 70 in Eastern New Mexico, and returned to MLRA 30, the Mojave Desert, in 2014. Leo Lato is the project leader for the SSO office. Leon got his Bachelor's of Science in Natural Resources from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 1985. He started immediately with NRCS in Elko, Nevada, mapping soil in southeast Elko County. In 1999, he moved to Las Vegas to be the SSPL for Clark County Area Soil Survey. He has been mapping soil since and is part of the Million Acre Mapper Club. Congratulations. He has been working in Southern Nevada and Southeastern California, mostly in MLRA 30, including Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center at 29 Palms National Training Center, Fort Irwin, Joshua Tree National Park, and most recently, Mojave National Preserve, California. Please welcome and be attentive to these folks. So thank you very much. You guys may start.
Great. Thanks, Deb. Well, welcome. Seemingly the preserve is in the middle of nowhere and nothing is going on. Pretty typical conclusion for the untrained passerby on the interstate. However, obviously stuff is going on even out there, and we hope to show you small glimpses of the beautiful expanse above and below the surface. So as Deb mentioned, I'm Matthew Ballmer in Victorville here. Presenting with me today is the much more seasoned and longtime fellow expert of the soils here, Leon Lato. The photo on the left looks like it's awesome volcanic strata, but it's actually a photo of our other current and very prominent soil scientist, Russell Plum. He doesn't really like to be seen much, so he actually approved this photo to be used. Regarding this survey project, we're just the three last standing men here. There's been over a dozen staff that have worked on this project. It's taken over a decade. So here you see the preserve in black, outlined in black, just about in the middle of our MLRA 30. It's Mojave Desert outlined in green. So spatially, the preserve is really central to what the Mojave Desert is. And the Mojave Desert is defined as high desert, generally above about 1,400 feet, despite Death Valley being 238 feet below sea level. Even Soda Lake is in the western corner of the preserve, is only about 870 feet above sea level. The Mojave is defined by many climate attributes and the closed mountain basin systems or troughs. And the Mojave consists of these high slope basins with playa bottoms, a grading slope piedmonts coming off steep rocky mountains, versus the lower Colorado Desert or Sonoran Desert to the south in dark blue. That's MLRA 40 now, which consists generally of lower slope watersheds through open drainages. They drain in internally or externally to the Colorado River in the Gulf of California. The Mojave is also colder than the lower Colorado, but not as cold as the MLRA to the north, MLRA 29. So it's also part of the Great Basin physiographic region. It's a transit. The Mojave is a transition between those two major systems. So you'll see a lot of Great Basin type of topography, Hoist and Graben faults, and geology throughout the Mojave. So this map here just shows a brief status update on all of our survey areas. The red survey areas are published. The yellow, except for CA 795, which is Mojave National Preserve, the yellows are all in progress, and even some of the blue areas have been started. All of the blue areas are to be mapped under our 2026 initiative. And the picture on the left is just a typical Torrey salmon in the preserve, very common soil. So this here you can see also the preserve where it falls between two major interstates, I-15 and the 40 to the south. If you ever drive into California from Vegas or Flagstaff, the Grand Canyon, you'll skirt right by it. The preserve is 1.6 million acres. It ranges in elevation from 270 meters to 2,400 meters. The soil temperature regimes are hyperthermic to mesic, and the soil moisture is typic-aeritic to ustic-aeritic. The wetter intergrades thereof are mainly on the eastern flank of the preserve and the higher elevations. The precip range is from less than 4 on the western side there near Baker, up above 12 in the higher elevation. This map here is provided, actually, it's a Park Service map showing the wilderness areas. Over half of the preserve is designated wilderness and restricted road access, except for the roads, or restricted vehicle access, except for on the roads. So we use the road network as much as possible for accessing our sites. The preserve manages lands a little bit different than national parks. So you can still hunt, camp, recreate, but there's a very strong emphasis on restoration, eliminating signs of human impact. And it's a very interesting challenge with the assortment of long-time ranching and homesteading and mining that's taking place. And that's another typical soil up in the higher elevation. It's a haplargid. So here, with the focus on wildlands, wilderness lands, wildlife ecology and recreation in the preserve, it oversees a large segment of desert tortoise critical habitat shaded on the map on the right. Over half of the preserve falls under this designation. This was a primary part of managing our site selections as well. All of our sites had to be accompanied by cultural resources and biological approval. A lot of continued land use encroaches into this critical habitat, and the preserve's working to protect the wildlife. This slide here shows a recent project. You may have seen it if you've driven into Vegas recently. It's a newer type of solar energy project. Came online there, I think actually before 2016. And you can see on the map on the right that it actually falls outside of critical habitat for the tortoise, but the project still went through great lengths to protect the tortoises. And interestingly enough, projects like these and other solar projects in the desert create a new type of habitat that can be really beneficial to some desert wildlife, providing shade and protection. So briefly, just there's tons of this presentation, is of course by no means a complete window to the examination of the Mojave Desert, the National Preserve, or all the soils and wildlife. There's great literature. This is a book I came across which covers the expansion into the west. There's great descriptions of anthropological interactions with the Mojave tribe, and then the Mojave Trail, which came from Santa Fe, still intersects or traverses the national park. The Spanish Trail goes up into Las Vegas, out of the preserve. So that's a great read. The Wikipedia, and also the Park Service itself has a great place to start to get background or plan a trip. So the preserve was created in 1994 by the California Desert Protection Act, and it really emphasized retaining and enhancing a place to do research for natural systems. The USGS did a study in 2004, which created this publication, which is really, really fine background in the natural history there. So if you want a deep read on a lot of that, there's tons of research. We came across some while doing the project, and one of the researchers we got to work with was at a University of Las Vegas, and Dr. Manny Williams. She was doing her thesis on biotic crust, which there's a lot of it in the preserve and across the desert. It's interestingly not something that we use in current taxonomy, but it was definitely a point of conversation, and also how that dovetails into our ecological sites. The McFadden paper was a strong piece of work that we used in describing the volcanic flows. There's 3 of them in the preserve, relatively young, from 10 to 100,000 years old. And then, of course, other natural resource stakeholders like California Native Plant Society. They were doing a native plant survey at the same time we were out there. The National Park Service was really interested in our product to help develop their grazing management plans. And then there's some X-ray diffraction that was done on one of our sites that came about after a SSSA tour that we had. So lots of research still going on out there. The park, as I explained a little bit earlier about the elevation, the temperature is very elevation dependent. Clark Mountain is the highest point at 7,900 feet, and Baker's down near 880 feet. The temperatures vary considerably along this range, and summer temperatures average from 90 upwards to 105 in the summers, and can get down into the 20s in the winter. There's a picture in our later on one of the reviews where it was snowing. So It's quite a large range of temperature and moisture. You can see where the mountain range, the green polygon there, really outlines the New York and Providence mountains, and then Clark Mountain is in the smaller polygon. That's the I-15 flows right through there. So those are the high points, and then the red polygon is the low area around Baker. The southern portion of the preserve is also hyperthermic along I-40. Okay. So this is our climate scheme for MLRA 30 and 40. The red box just captures that large catena of climate and moisture. It's typic-aeritic to ustic-aeritic and hyperthermic up into just barely mesic. And we were fortunate to have, not only in the preserve, but across the MLRA, we've had a long-term soil temperature study and data collection project going on. So we had these temperature data loggers in the preserve before 2010, before the survey started, and they really helped to substantiate some of the mean annual soil temperature models that were built in GIS, and substantiate some of our soil taxa associations, and generally anything above 15% slope on a strong north-south aspect is going to be going to have a significant differential in the soil moisture classes. This slide just shows where the 4 remaining grazing allotments are. There's one up in the Clark Mountain area to the north of I-15, and then the 3 that are pretty much stacked adjacent to each other on the southern Piedmont slope. These were really important to the preserve. They continue to manage active grazing, and so our ecological sites really were going to help them develop. We tried to help them develop their grazing monitoring plan, but there is still active cowboying out there. We also used, you can see on the right, how we use the roads for some of our data points. So just to get into the survey, it started really before 2010, but when Pete Bigham was still in the Park Service, he was instrumental in getting surveys started across the Park Service. And so we started pre-mapping, and we was aggregating the temperature data that we've been collecting. 2011 started field work. 2013 we had a sampling plan that was put into place. Unfortunately, in 2018, there was a lapse in the interagency agreement, and there was no field work done for at least a year. And then 2023, we were able to wrap it up and get it published. So well over a decade. I'm going to hand it over to Leon to get into some of the KSSL sampling information.
Good morning. This is Leon Lato in Las Vegas, Nevada. So these are the sample points that we had running in 2013 when we collected the data. The sample plan was submitted the year before to get approval. We had 7 sites that were fully characterized out there, and 2 grab sample areas to verify certain classifications out there. Next slide, please. This is the list of our site pet-on IDs and the sites we did out there. I'll probably refer to them as site 1, 2, 3, 4, rather than saying the whole site pit on ID name. This is a listing of our series, and I'll be talking about 6 of these, I think. So let's go to the next slide, please. When we started that week sampling, this was our first day at Zizix. We spent the night at Zizix, California research station out there, part of their California university chain. As you can see, the wind's blowing pretty good on the palm trees, and the dust is blowing as well. You can't see very far, which is unusual for the Mojave Desert. Normally you can see for 20 miles. This is on the far western edge of the survey area. It's inside the park, and you can see that's in the spring area. Next slide. This is the next morning. It's still windy out, but it's much clearer. Didn't have the dust blowing around like we did the day before. This is more typical of it, and you can see the spring area that's right at the base of these mountains here on the playa. Next slide. This is our first sampling area, site number 1. It was on Soda Dry Lake. We originally called this Soda Lake series a new series, and it is, we called it a fine loamy mixed superactive hyperthermic gypsic haplosalad. Gypsic soils are not too uncommon out here in the Mojave. The location of this site is in a semi-basin on the playa floor. As you can see, it doesn't have very many rocks in the profile. That's probably because of all the salts in the profile that it deteriorates the rocks so quickly that they don't last very long out there. The lab results came back with a different classification for us. It said it was, instead of fine loamy, that was fine silty. And instead of being a gypsic haplosalad, it classified as a typic haplosalad. As you can see at the bottom, it says gypsum was only 2 to 3% throughout the whole profile. But the upper part was 2,000, SAR of 2,000 on top, and it worked its way down to 300 at the bottom of the pit. And the same thing for the EC. It was 130 at the upper part and 75 down in the lower part. I think the reason I was fooled by this pit was because of the coarse sodium crystals in there. I thought they were coarser sand grains being ground up in there, but there was so much of it that we didn't have enough water to dilute all the salt out before we lost all our soil. So that took a little bit of lab work to find that out. All right, next slide. In 2015, so we had a SSSA tour come through the park as part of it. And down below in the lower left-hand corner of that photo, you can see a spring area. And that's where this sample was taken from. Some of the people on the tour couldn't believe the salt crust that's on the very surface of this profile. It was very hard and indurated, and they couldn't believe that was salt composition. The main ingredient, when he took it back for analysis to his lab, it was found out to be halite, which is a sodium chloride. That was a dominant soil out there. You can see a piece of it on the upper right-hand corner there, what it looks like. The site is located near a spring area, so we had a water table at about 4.5 feet in this pit. In the water table out there in the Soda Dry Lake, it's shallowest right there on the west side, and it gets deeper as you go east, across the playa in depth. Let's see. Next slide, please. This is site number 2. It's a new series called Zizix. It's located about 7 miles northeast of site 1. I did forget to mention on site 1 that we changed it or correlated the name to Yahana series, Yahana family. It was very similar to the Yahana family soil, but it was saltier than what Yahana allows for. So that's the reason we tacked on family to it. So this site here is only 7 miles northeast of that last site. It's on the fan aprons of the Fan Piedmont to the east. Parent material is dominantly granitic alluvium. Vegetation, as you can see, the vegetation cover is about 5%. dominated by creosote bush and white burr sage. As you see on the classification, it's a typic Tory salmon, big pile of sand. Production out here is very low. It's only about 100 to 200 pounds per acre. On the next slide, our next stop was at site number 3. This is also a typic Tory salmon, but you can probably tell from this that instead of being alluvial sand material, this is Aeolian sand material. This is located about 15 miles to the southeast of Zizek, the last pit we looked at. The reason for the sampling was because of its large extent out there. There's probably 30,000 acres or more of this type of soil. It's located on sand sheets. Vegetation cover out here is probably 10 to 20%, and it's dominated by big guida grass. Next slide, please. The reason we wanted to look at these two sites is that they're both Tory salmons, but one is Dale Lake on the Aeolian sands, a very productive site, and the other is Zizek's, an alluvial sand soil on a very low producing site. That is pretty common out there. The water-laid sands, for some reason, are far less productive than the Aeolian sands out there. So I thought that's why we separated soils out as well, for that reason. Next pit we went to was number 4. This is located about 45 miles to the east-northeast of Dale Lake Stop, which is located on the west side of the park. This is located on the east side. Did we mention the fact that the park runs for about 68 miles east and west and 61 miles north and south? So we cover a lot of area out there. These next few soils we were interested in sampling for our ustic aeritic soils, soil moisture regimes out there. Originally, we called this one Fairland for a new series, coined it from Fairland Valley or Landfair Valley out there. The classification was a fine loamy ustic paleargid. But when we got the lab results, we found out that we weren't correct in our classification. When we did sample this site too for lab sampling, we dug it out second time. We dug a little deeper and we hit a petrocalcic horizon below 150 centimeters in it. So that was a little something new. This landform is a fan remnant. Parent material is just alluvium from igneous rocks. And it has a pretty good argillic horizon in it. Lab results for this came back, and so we had to misclassify it, like I mentioned before. There was a 22% increase in clay at the argillic boundary on this soil based on lab, which makes it an abruptic boundary. So that changed it from an ustic caplargid to an ustic paleargid out there, a new classification. And it just so happens that back in 2006, I set up and established the Meinhardt series out there in an adjacent area of BLM land that had a grazing allotment on it that we were working on back in the day. Happens to be the same classification, and it's only 4 miles away from this pit location. So we correlated it to Meinhardt series with the updated information from the lab data. Next, please, is our Sagamore soil. This one's a bit more interesting for most people. Oh, QSL lab sampling, all right. Well, that was Sue Southard. Next slide. All right. Well, we're in the Sagamore site now. All right. Okay. This is located 5 miles west of where the Meinhardt soil pit was just looking at. The big difference here is that this alluvium material is from limestone and dolomite, not igneous rock. It has a strongly cemented petrocalcic horizon at less than 50 centimeters deep. That's why it's a loamy carbonatic thermic shallow calcic petrocalcid out there. The center picture shows you what the original pit description was that Stephen did out there. In the picture on the right, it's the same spot, but using the backhoe. Looks quite a bit better than the original pit, I think. That's the benefit of having a backhoe when you can at times. The two pictures on the left, they're both of the same location too. You notice the tree on the right, same tree in both those pictures. The upper picture was taken when Stephen dug it, and the lower picture was taken when I dug it 2 years later. You can see a lot more big diagrass on the site in the lower picture. A difference of 2 years and a good rain year would be that. Next, please. This is a close-up of the petrocalcic horizon. Got my soils knife sitting on top of it. And you can see the nice profile of the pit itself again. So that's the petrocalcic horizon. Next, we went to Cedar Wash, pit number 7 here. Well, this is a different side, but that is Sue Southern and Nathan Starman. Sue was taking pictures of the soil pit while we were sampling, and Nathan, he was providing important shades to get a quality picture. But this one is a Cedar Wash location. We don't have a picture of the profile itself, but it's not very exciting. It's just a coarse, loamy ustic haplargid. The haplargid in it, argillic horizon, is pretty weak. Not much to look at. The vegetation is dominated by basin big sagebrush up here in higher elevations. And as you can see across the road, which is most of the area, it's been burned off by fires in the past. This is probably over 10, 20 years ago that fire went through, and it still hasn't returned to basin big sagebrush vegetation. Cedar Wash soil here is very deep. Its co-soil is Sea Tree Pass, which is an established series, but the difference with that that's associated with this is that it's a very shallow soil to granitic bedrock. And you can identify it from this site by the fact that you have bitterbrush growing on the surface, whereas this one only has basin big sagebrush growing on it. And next. Okay, again, this is Sue Southern and Nathan. And it's also Carrie Ann and Genevieve with an improvised clothesline to hang our soil clods for drying as part of the process. Next. This is our soils group at the end of the sampling process. Stephen was with us earlier in the collecting data on his pits to the west. This is what the last picture of the trip was about. And that's it for the sampling crew. Matthew?
Strong work, Leon. Thanks for improvising on those additional slides. We like Nate Starman and Sue Southern and hanging clods, so we wanted to emphasize those a little bit more. I'm going to carry on here with the actual map units of the preserve. You can see the Web Soil Survey product there on the right, and common Mojave Desert tarantula there on the left. The survey ended up constituting of 132 map units. 23 of these were brought in from adjacent surveys, 12 from Clark County, 1 from Fort Irwin, which is just maybe 100 miles to the west. 1 from Joshua Tree National Park, which is again about 150 miles to the south. And then 9 were brought in from the Northwest Mojave survey area, 805 to the north. There was a grazing allotment that was mapped there also by Leon in the early 2000s. So we were able to use some of those map units. And then that ended up with 682 components, that's both major and minor, and then 28 new series. So just to break down those components, it was comprised of 78 total or 7 unique miscellaneous land types, leaving us with 604 soil components, 252 major components, and 430 minors. So here's a nice map of our nearly 2,200 pit locations and soil profiles. You can see that in the table on the left, how they were dispersed across the years. As I mentioned earlier, 2018, there was no field work. So pretty remarkable piece of work getting 1,500 head-ons and sites in NRCS. All 682 components have rep head-ons fully populated. Okay, this here is a picture of map unit 381. It's on the southern portion of the survey adjacent to Highway 40. And it's comprised of Fenner and Ruby Lee. It's the second largest map unit in the preserve at 75,000 acres. Fenner's a sandy typic torreorthent, hyperthermic typic torreorthent, and Ruby Lee is a coarse loamy mixed superactive hyperthermic typic haplargid. So what I was going to focus on here is that the largest 20 map units are over 20,000 acres in size, and they make up 700,000 acres. That's 15%. So 15% of the map units on the legend make up almost half of the 1.6 million acres of the preserve. So just some spatial trivia. And really that ties into the efficiency of the map units and the way that they're laid out naturally on the landscape. Here's an example of one of the photos we made for the manuscript, showing these two map units and how they're adjacent to each other on the landscape. The 376 is rock salad Holloman complex, 2 to 8% slopes. These are both new series, and they're both ustic sammets found in higher elevations under granite parent material. And 436 is a Alon said complex, 15 to 50% slopes. Both are mapped as families based on the depth variability in those profiles. They're fine loamy mixed superactive and mesic ustic haplargids. So again, the numbers on the left just show how the map units are oriented as far as how much acreage is gotten for each map unit. 37 map units fall within 10,000 acres each, and they make up about a third of the survey. So 77 or less than 10,000 acre size map units make up the most number of map units, but only make up just over 300,000 acres. That's significant when you consider the amount of work each map unit takes to populate in NRCS, all the component data, and justifying the component correlation work and whatnot. So as far as how much mapping you're getting done, per map unit, this kind of tells a story of the survey area and how much work we had to do. So just to touch on the miscellaneous land types we used, the picture on the right there shows rock outcrop, with what was mapped as rubble land and some intermittent vegetation. And what's important here is that throughout the survey area, there's several landscapes and landform surfaces that look like miscellaneous land type. This scree slope is one of them. Even though we mapped it as rubble land, under certain circumstances, we might excavate that and find a soil. As you can see, there's vegetation growing there. So there is likely a soil there, but for intensive purposes of the survey, we elected to map it as a soil complex with rubble land. So this slide here, wanted to just again demonstrate the efficiency of using the series and which ones were most dominant. Of the 682 components, it's made up of 104 unique series. And you can see that a rhizo occurred in 7 map units, and the predominance of series occurred in only 2 or 1 map unit. So 92 series occurred in most of the legend. And even though these soils accounted for most of the acreage, they only occurred, or they were the ones that occurred in most of the map units. So again, demonstrating which soils were dominant in the preserve. Even though a rhizo occurred in the most number of map units, it came in second as far as the total acreage. It was overtaken by Dale Lake, coming in at over 83,000 acres. And what's also interesting in this table is to see how the preserve is dominated by sandy textures and torreorthents or sammets. Most notably here is that over 250,000 acres, or 18% of the preserve, is mapped in these taxa. And so creating these kind of metrics really shows a big picture as far as what types of soil and percentages cover a given area. The picture in the background is of a rhizo ore wash, map unit 429. It's a rhizo ore wash complex, 2 to 8% slopes. So again, here I wanted to just stratify the soils by taxa and how they occurred dominantly in the preserve. The torreorthents take the first place at almost 420,000 acres. Then haplargids at 320,000 acres. I'm rounding down here. Haplocalcids at 127,000 acres, and then Torrey salmons at 106,000 acres. So a lot of different soil types, but there's a few that really dominate in how prevalent they are. So of those 104 unique soils that we used in the 132 map units, we had to set up 28 new series. And as centrally located as the preserve is, it created an opportunity to see some dominant soil types that we just hadn't been able to map in other parts of the MLRA. And these were really dominated by that ustic auritic regime. Over half of the new, or almost half of the new series were in that moisture subclass. Thermic ustic was, I think, the most of those. And so Leon's going to get into talking about a few of our new series, most notably the loamy skeletal over cindery particle size class called lava tank.
Yes, lava tank series. This soil was set up on top of lava and cinder cones. These are fairly recent deposits of less than 16,000 years. As you can see in the profile in the center, we got soil material filling the cracks down to about 75 centimeters. And then the very bottom is just basically rock and air as you go lower into the profile. So we came up with the classification of loamy skeletal over cindery, thermic, typic, tori, orthin for it. Not a lot of development in it, but the soil, Eolian dust is starting to fill in the rock fragment pore spaces. And I found that both on the cinder cones and on the lava flows down below it. Okay, next. Oh, this is part of the cinder cone lava beds fields down there in Mojave National Preserve. Here you can see some of the air gaps in the lower part of the profile. I didn't have a can of air to clean it off with, so a lot of the dust from up above when I was digging it fell down to the lower part. But you can see some of the holes and the gaps of the rock fragments. Next slide. Kiwizer, this is new soil for the mesic area. Loamy skeletal, lithic ustic caplargid. This has got, the reason we're going with ustic on this is we have black grama showing up, some sandberg bluegrass, a little bit, occasionally you find cytos grama in there, but also the trees are picking up as well. That's usually our indicator that we're changing from typic iridic to ustic iridic. The soil is mesic, and as we mentioned earlier in the talk, the soil mean annual soil temperature on the north face versus the south face out here is quite drastic. It can be from 3 to 7 degrees Celsius difference. So if we took 4 degrees differential as a common, south faces on this hills could be 17 degrees Celsius, while the north face is 13 degrees Celsius on it, mean annual soil temperature. So quite a lot of contrast, and I think that's mainly due for the fact that lack of rain keeps us from modifying the climate so much. It makes a variation more greater. All right, next slide. This is a thermic version of that soil. Well, actually, this is actually the site of Kiwizer with woodland on it. As you get higher in elevation, you get trees coming in. And in the background, you can see Clark Mountain. That's the highest peak in the park. And in that bow area, you will find a scattering of 200 and 300 fir trees growing up there, but not enough to be dominant. This is pinyon juniper for Kiwizer on higher elevation, a different map unit. Next. This is Vegas glow. Emily named this soil, and I thought it was very appropriate because at nighttime, you can't help but notice the glow from Las Vegas nearby when you're out there in the field. It's loamy skeletal, thermic, lithic ustic caplargid. Again, it's not very deep, but again, it has black brush or black grama growing on it, along with the big guayata grass, Spanish dagger. There's also probably some banana yucca in there, and it's in the area of the cool thermic air part of the climate. Those are 3 of our new soils that we had in the ustic region. Matthew. All yours.
Thanks. Another note on Vegas glow is that we correlated another potential new series called Willow Springs. It was same taxa, but on volcanics, and we ended up correlating it to Vegas glow. So just a small point on that. This is we're going to wrap it up here with just a brief description on the deliverables to the Park Service. Obviously, it's available on the web, and we are providing a manuscript. It's an abridged manuscript, so some of the more traditional narrative sections aren't being produced, but we are providing a full detailed soil mapping and description section with photos and TUDs with photos of the profiles and landscapes. Also, copies of our raw data, our point file, 417 veg sheets, and a photo library. The last time I looked, those 2,200 pet-on sites, there was over 50,000 photos that we had taken over the years. Generally, each site has, a minimum of 5 to 6 photos, and so there's quite a photo library of the preserve. And then we got to build some block diagrams with one of our soil data quality specialists, Julie Baker. She helped render these in ArcScene, and they tell a story about subjective interpretation of parent material and give the users a different perspective on how mapping units occur on the landscape. So there's 2 large cross sections and then 5 square areas that are being developed. So to wrap it up, to just acknowledge all the staff that worked on the survey. Dustin Detweiler was our ecological site specialist for a number of years. And we actually worked with a third-party vendor to write our ecological sites for a number of years. Allison and Marshall. And then Cody Leslie was a volunteer with the district conservationists. Pictures up here on the right are 3 of our details, seasonal details that came out in 2020. They're there again. And then Scott Cardenas was one detail we had in 2022. So as you can see, a number of folks, you might recognize some of these names over the years. Some have retired, and we give them a lot of credence and kudos for their hard work. Both Leon and I love this photo. If you've ever been in the desert when it's raining, that's a magical time. And yet to see an actual flash flood is another magical thing happen watching, as long as you're not in the wash, but being able to watch it from afar, it's a pretty cool event to see take place. This is in Cedar Wash, which one of the new series was named after, and that took place in August of 2012. This was the day after. So nothing like seeing geomorphology in action. Total flooding. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Matthew and Leon. I have a couple quick questions, and we only have a few minutes, so please be 5 minutes left. So Anonymous has, I also wondered how often gypsum crystals are confused for sodium chloride crystals. Is EC a good enough indicator to tell the difference in your experience? One of you, please.
Yeah, I think it is good enough experience. The problem with that EC and running SARs is that you have to be in the lab to run it. Something you can't run out in the field when you're describing it. So that definitely would be helpful, but since we were having lab samples on it, I never ran ECs on it.
Okay. Thank you, Leon. I noticed the recognition of petrocalcic horizons. What about durapans on this survey area?
Durapans are not real common out in Mojave Desert. I think probably 90% of the pans we run into are petrocalcic horizons because the influence of lime from rainfall and so forth tend to dominate. But we do have a few durapans, and I found out there, and they were associated next door to the cinder cones, which I thought was interesting, but they weren't very extensive.
Okay. Thank you very much, Leon and Matthew. Appreciate it. You guys reach out to them if you have any other questions. Great pictures. Appreciate it. Also a reminder that March 12th will be the next Field Notes seminar.